Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and I thank you for joining us here today for another episode of the Mad Philosophers Society Podcast. I've got a special guest here with us today. She is a certified coach and writer with a passion for psychology and philosophy. She's also the creator of the Unknow-It-All Instagram account. And it's a very awesome account that I recommend all you guys check out. I personally enjoy it. It really makes you take a look at yourself in a different way, and that's one of the things that I've always appreciated about her page. And let's see here. So she is going to also be doing a webinar coming out soon within the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. Honorary member of the Mad Philosophers Society. And here to discuss with you today the philosophical paradox between practicing acceptance and taking action in life. That's something that we all struggle with. When do we just accept circumstances as they are? And when do we take action? So here to talk to you today about that is myself and Diane Zachariah. Diane, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me, Jesse. I am doing very well. Thank you. How are you?
I am doing well. I just got off of night shift. I'll tell you. I mean, it was a heck of a night. So I appreciate you doing this here for me. And apologies in advance if I'm kind of all over the place and my brain's sleep deprived. But
No problem.
we're definitely going to get through this.
No
It's,
problem.
it's definitely a pleasure to have you. So let's see.
I'm looking forward to it.
Definitely. Me too. Me too. I know I've got a list of questions here that I want to ask you that we're going to go over. So let's see. So Diane, for our listeners unfamiliar with this dichotomy that we're talking about between practicing acceptance and taking action, what exactly are we talking about when we talk about taking action in life and practicing acceptance? How can we identify these certain circumstances and situations for the audience members?
So, practicing action is a very sort of goal-oriented approach to solving problems. It's recognizing that there are certain things in life that are within your power to change, and it's taking responsibility for those things and going ahead and changing them. So that's taking action. Whereas acceptance is a sort of complementary way. It's not the opposite, it's complementary because it's recognizing that there are also things in life that are completely outside of your control, and that if you go around trying to change them, you're just wasting your time. So it's sort of accepting the present moment as it is, acknowledging the reality of the situation, acknowledging all that is outside of your control, and accepting your emotions to those circumstances, accepting that things won't always be pleasant, that you're going to be scared or unhappy or fearful, and that's just life and that's just the way it is. And so you can practice both at the same time.
Very well put. So there is an old proverb. I'm sure you're familiar with it. God grant me the strength to change what I
The
can
serenade
change.
prayer, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The peace to know to accept what I need to accept, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's
Yes.
definitely a good way to look at the dichotomy between action and acceptance. I would say for me, when we talk about action, we're primarily talking about overcoming the fear of the unknown. It's like that's one of the biggest things that prevents us from taking action in life is this fear of, what could happen if I act, and a big part of taking action in life is overcoming the fear of the unknown, the things that are often hold us back. It could be a simple thing, as simple as getting out of bed. For some people, it's simply a struggle. Getting out of bed is a big action for some people. And for some
Yeah.
people, it could be as complex as embarking on a new career.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're talking about acceptance, for myself, acceptance means that we adopt a practice of letting go in life. There's a Michael Singer quote that I really enjoy, where he says, the problem isn't the outside world. The outside world is what it is. The problem is that you've decided how you need the outside world to be in order for you to be okay. Essentially, what he's talking about there is adopting a practice of acceptance, accepting the outside world as it is.
Yeah. There's something that I'd like to add there. So when you have a thought or when you have an emotion, there are like 3 layers to look at. So the first would be the experience itself. It's like when you're angry, like, I'm feeling angry. That's the experience. You are your anger at the moment. It's sort of consumed you, and all you can feel is the anger. So number 1, that's the experience. And then number 2 would be the story in your head about your anger. Like, what is going on in your mind at that time? It's this narrative of, oh, my life sucks, and this person is treating me this way, and I shouldn't be experiencing this, or I shouldn't be feeling it, blah, blah, blah. There's this, big story or this narrative that we tell ourselves about how life should be and how things are not going that way in the moment. Okay, so the first part is when you are experiencing an emotion or when you are experiencing a thought where you have sort of become that emotion or you have become that thought. There is no separation at all. You're just feeling your anger, for example, or feeling your sadness, and you think, I'm angry, I'm sad, and that's it, right? There's like nothing greater going on at that moment. So that's the raw experience in itself. And then 2 is when the story kicks in, this narrative of how things should be and how things are really not going your way that moment. Like, this person shouldn't be treating me this way, or I deserve more respect, or whatever it is, right? You know that sort of loop that you go into when you feel like you're a victim of life and a victim of circumstances. So that's the story that you tell yourself about your experience. And the third is awareness. That's when you can separate yourself from your experience and from the story of your experience. So you're sort of separate from the two. So in that situation, you're not saying, I'm angry. You would be saying to yourself, I'm aware that I'm angry, and I'm aware that I'm creating a story about my anger. And that's what Michael Singer was talking about in that quote of his, where he said, you've created a narrative of how things should be, instead of recognizing that things are just the way that they are. When you go into awareness, you're automatically in acceptance of experience and of the story of your experience.
Wow, that's very profoundly put. I like it. Yeah, from even from a neuroscience perspective, that really is a great example of how the brain works. Sensory information comes in, it hits your body, it goes to your brain. Your body picks up the bodily information, which is how you're feeling, literally how you're feeling, and creates a narrative. So just like you said, your emotion comes first, and then from there you create a narrative around that, and then it reaches your consciousness, and from there you become aware of the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's very aptly put.
Exactly.
It's very Gabor Mate. I recently finished his book a while ago. The Myth of Meaning. Where he talks about allowing emotion to complete a cycle. And, I got to tell you, before listening to that book, I'm walking around at work while I'm listening to this stuff. And, he's talking about this emotional cycle. And I'm kind of like thinking to myself, emotional cycle, what's kind of the emotion? You feel it and then, you suppress it, but at the same time, no, dude, what you said very much makes a lot of sense. That's enlightening to me. That explains to me, exactly how this emotional cycle kind of works, even within the brain.
When you suppress it, it doesn't go away. It just stays there and it festers inside your subconscious. So if you just
That's my
let it
toxic
flow through.
masculinity coming through, man.
Yeah.
That's what we
No.
do. That's what us men do. We bottle that stuff down and put the tightest cork on it that we can, you know?
Uh-huh. No, but instead, if you just allow it to flow through, it'll just flow through, and then you're over it. That's it. Like,
I'm gonna try
so
that next
another
time.
a pro
I'm gonna try that next time for sure.
yeah. I think a problem that people have with acceptance and with pain in general is that they just cannot accept that we have pain in life. Because I think a lot of us have this core belief that pain is to be avoided at all costs. Discomfort is a sign that something is going wrong. And so we just can't accept that pain is just a normal part of life. It's inescapable. It happens to everyone at like all periods in life, and it's temporary if you allow it to be temporary. If you just allow it to flow through.
There was that, that reminds me of something interesting that I've heard recently on, while I was listening to Sapiens, Yuval
Mm-hmm.
Harari. Really good book. I mean, I'd recommend that, to anyone listening who is looking for
Mm-hmm.
their next interesting read is Sapiens. And in it, I mean, he basically says, that from an evolutionary standpoint, pain is more beneficial than happiness. I mean, pain is really what moves you one way or the other, and that's
Mm-hmm.
why we have this inclination to feel pain. That's why it's like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot easier to feel pain than it is to find happiness in life. I mean,
Yeah.
we feel pain everywhere. You go to the grocery store and there's no place to park, and suddenly now you're feeling pain. I mean,
Yeah.
man, I'm probably going to experience that later today. I had it a few days ago. So I mean, it's like our pain our pain sensors were set through
Mm-hmm.
evolutionary processes to be much more sensitive than our inclination for happiness.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, is it doom and gloomy? I don't know. What do you think? Is that a doom and gloomy way to kind of look at life?
Not
Do you think there's truth
really.
to
I
it?
think I think there's truth to it. I think pain can be useful in a lot of ways. Like you said, it teaches us things. Pain teaches us lessons and how we can improve. The problem is when there's too much pain and then we try to suppress it and then it festers.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
You just like me have bad coping mechanisms with your pain. That's it. It's all about
Yeah.
how we deal with it, I guess.
Yeah,
What we've
and there
learned in
is a
life.
sort of there is a kind of optimal level of pain and discomfort that you need in order to progress in life. Like you work out, so for example, that to build a muscle, you need to stress it a little bit and create those micro tears that then repair themselves, and that's how the muscle grows stronger over time. And it's the same thing with psychology. It's like your mind grows through discomfort and just through pushing yourself to experience difficult and challenging things. And so in that case, pain is a certain amount of pain is sort of essential for growth. But of course, if it's too much pain, then it can of course be traumatizing and can sort of destroy you as well. So there is a flip side to that.
Yeah, and there's an interesting psychology behind it, that's really hard to explain from a neurological perspective, about how in many ways, pain is pleasure, pain is pleasurable for some people. It's like they
The
enjoy pain.
masochists.
Yeah, yeah, for masochists, there's a really good quote that I like by, oh my God, I forget his name, and people will kill me for forgetting that guy's name, but the quote is, "Pain is weakness leaving the body." It's a quote by an old Marine, that was
Mm-hmm.
he's accused of war propaganda and that kind of thing. But at the same time, some people say that guy was nothing short of a saint to many people, that, struggled in a gym at any point in their lives. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, pain is weakness leaving the body. That's the kind of guy that enjoyed that kind of thing, dude. That guy would go in the gym and he would live for the pain.
David Goggins?
It wasn't David Goggins. It was, but I'm
No,
sure
I know
David
it wasn't
Goggins is a
David
fan.
Goggins, but it's the same mentality, you mean?
I seen a video the other day by David Goggins, and this guy literally, he's got a mansion behind him, all the luxuries of life behind him. He's got a pier leading out to his own private lake. And what is he
Hmm.
doing? I mean, I would be sitting there on the lake, having a drink and reading a book and this and that, and watching my kids play and just enjoying life. What's this guy doing? He's on the dock right there with his hands tied behind his back and his feet tied together, and he jumps in the water. And then from there, he swims to the other side of the lake, bound hand and feet together. And his
Okay.
wife or his partner's there with them, and she said that he does this every day because this is the thing that he hated to do most in the service, was to do this swim that he had to do with his hands and his feet bound together. That was the one thing that he hated to do the most, so he does it every day. I mean, man, is that a form of masochism, dude, or is it some kind of other drive? I mean, it's interesting things we are as people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so like people like David Goggins are interesting to me. I appreciate that intense amount of drive. I don't possess it myself. I don't think I could ever be that. Like you say, I do think it comes across as a bit masochistic. To me, that level of intensity is a little too extreme. Yeah, I would be a little bit more chilled out, basically.
Yeah, I think that. I mean,
Yeah,
as much as I like the guy, as much as I respect the guy, I don't know. I think there's more to life than just torturing yourself. you know,
exactly.
you know.
So yeah, people like David Goggins are big into doing, big into taking action. But there is that
Yeah.
other mode of life, which is being, which is just having fun, being in the moment. And that's more about acceptance. So I think David Goggins is much more into action than acceptance.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't
Yeah.
know, I haven't met him
It,
or talked to him personally. Just
Yeah,
just
true. As
based on what I know
inspiring
about him.
he is he is. I know there's a
Yeah.
lot of David Goggins fans out there. He's an
Yeah.
inspiring guy, definitely for sure. I mean, if you're one that struggles getting out of bed, he is definitely
Mm-hmm.
someone to model yourself after and to
Mm-hmm.
to to follow in life. I mean, that guy will,
Yeah.
he could save your life if you're in a dark place, for sure.
Definitely. Yeah.
So,
Take
let's see,
whatever
moving
role
on.
model you have, take what's useful, and
Yeah,
leave the
for
rest.
sure. Bruce Lee, man. Bruce Lee, he said the same exact thing. So so moving on, we'll go to our next question. So in today's political climate and ongoing culture war for control over the future of society, how can we practice acceptance? How can a practice of acceptance coexist with this need for action and social change? Where do we draw the line between accepting things the way they are and facilitating social change?
So this is a very difficult question for me to answer because first of all, as
For
a
me
coach,
too.
I don't no, as a coach, I don't see it as my job to sort of impose my views on others, so I won't be discussing like any specific policy. I'll just be talking about the stuff in general, politics in general. And I think that one problem that we see in politics nowadays is that things are so extremely polarized between the left and the right. And there's this sense now that your side or whatever side that you believe in is on the side of the angels, just we're the good guys, and the other side, well, they're the spawn of Satan and they're out there just destroying the world with their ideas and their views. And that is a very dangerous view to have. In psychology, that's called splitting or black and white thinking. And whenever you catch yourself thinking that way, you can be sure that there's some kind of cognitive distortion or defense mechanism going on. What splitting does is that it allows us to be absolutely horrible to the people that we hate while feeling completely self-righteous and moralistic about it, and it helps us feel that we are good and superior people. And so one thing that I would say in terms of acceptance is to accept that other people believe what they do, not because they're evil, but because whatever combination of nature and nurture that they've experienced has led them to believe the things that they have believed. And that if you had that same combination of nature and nurture, you might act in exactly the same way. Other people are not there to make you happy. They're not there to please you or to behave as you want them to. They're there to live in the way that makes sense to them. There's a book that I like about this topic. It's called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. And I love that book. I recommend it to anyone who's interested in politics. So yeah, check that out if you want.
I'll definitely be checking that out. I'm always looking for good reads, and that's a very good answer. It's very Buddhist, very Buddhist of you.
Yeah.
It's very Eastern philosophy, I mean, for me, it's like, I think the reason why we have this political discourse is kind of the same, it's like we fall into this trap of believing in, that, the other side is different because that they have this, there's something about them that's making decisions, for or against other people, and really the truth is, all things similar, if you found yourself in their shoes, same genetics, same upbringing, same environment, same neighborhood, same teachers, you would be the exact same person. You wouldn't make any different decisions. You would feel the same way. For example, here in the United States, a big topic over the last year, oh man, I get so tired of hearing about it, is, the whole January 6th thing, and the insurrection that happened over at, in the Capitol, and there's a famous Viking helmet guy. I don't know if you're familiar with Viking helmet guy.
I've seen him, yeah.
Yeah. And see, the thing is, it's like, I think people are affronted by that guy. They see that and they're upset by that guy. And for me, I try to look at it and I remind myself, well, you know what? If I was born in that guy's shoes, I would be that Viking helmet guy. I would be Viking helmet guy, so, I think the first way that we get out of this political turmoil that we have, and I'm not sure how bad it is in other countries, but here in the United States, it's pretty divisive.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, there definitely is a bit of a culture war going on, and for me, it's like, I think the first step on the path to peace is to know that if you were born in that guy's shoes, you would be Viking helmet guy. This guy is a product of his upbringing, his conditions, his environment, his genetics, and by looking at it that way, I think, we could find peace with Viking helmet guy. We can make peace with him and with all other people that we have, a political disagreement with. For me, it's like in terms of where to draw the line, because it's like, it's like who's still, it's like we want to jockey for our political position. We want to, be advocates for, the people that we believe that are in our tribe, So, for me, where we draw the line is by examining the situation and looking at it and asking ourselves, are we asking people to behave a certain way in order to appease us, sure, fight for social change, fight for your rights, fight for, if we didn't fight for our rights, disabled people wouldn't be able to freaking use the bathroom when they go into a restaurant. You gotta fight for your rights, but that's not the same thing as forcing everyone to believe as you believe so that you can be okay, say, for example, I'm going to throw a controversial one out there, this use of pronouns, if you want to use pronouns, that's fine, but you can't expect everyone else to just fall in line with that and to all of a sudden decide that they're going to use pronouns too, because that's what's going to make you feel good inside. So it's like, I mean, that's not that you're never going to find peace that way. It's like on both sides. People need to acknowledge that Viking helmet guy is the way that he is because of his circumstances, just as the other side needs to acknowledge that the other side is the way they are because of their circumstances and conditions. I mean, for me, it's like that's where the acceptance comes in. Action, we take action,
Yeah,
because we want to see social change. We want a better environment
exactly.
for our kids,
Mm-hmm. So action, when it comes to taking action, the first thing that I would say is learn to pick your battles. Don't try to fight every single issue, but pick the one that is most important to you. And then, yeah, while you're taking action on those things that are most important to you, like whether it's raising awareness about that topic or speaking to people about it or, I don't know, voting in a certain way, whatever it is that you want to do, make sure that you sort of remember the humanity of the other side while you're doing it. Don't think of
Yeah.
them as the spawn of Satan. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And on both sides. I mean, it definitely goes both ways. I mean, like
Exactly.
for me, for example,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I call everyone man and dude. I call everyone man and dude, woman, male or not, and that's just because I'm a
Yeah.
California guy. I mean, I'm from freaking Northern California, born and raised, it's the culture that I grew up in, it's like we tend to refer to people as man and dude. It's not that I'm misgendering anyone. It's just
Mm-hmm.
me. It's just the way that I've learned to talk, So I mean, and there is that too. It's
Yeah.
like you got to kind of understand, It's like people aren't doing what they're doing to affront you. It's just the way that they have
Mm-hmm.
developed themselves as a person. It's the way their circumstances have developed them.
Exactly.
And it's interesting that you
Mm-hmm.
bring up too here on the psychological aspect of it, because I mean what I'm familiar with is the term in-group bias. In-group bias, how we
Yeah,
tend
that's
to,
another way of thinking. Yeah.
yeah, totally. In-group bias, we tend to group everyone that's in our in-group and attribute positive characteristics to them. It's like you take people that are in your
Exactly. Yeah.
in-group and you assume that they're more loyal and that they're more honest and that they're more upright
Mm-hmm.
and ambitious, and you take the out group and you automatically assume negative attributes to them. You assume that they're
Mm-hmm.
dishonest and disloyal and all of these
Mm-hmm.
negatives, and it's a psychological trap that's kind of been ingrained in us through evolution, I mean, with,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's evolutionary processes that have helped us in life. I mean, you grow up in an ancient hunter-gatherer society. Say you're in a tribe of, say, 50 people, and there's 5 tribes out there, on the outskirts, and, they're all tribes of 50 people. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have any kind of social media or internet to know what these people are about. You kind of got to go and meet these people and kind of make judgments about them. You meet one person, you're going to assume the whole tribe is like that. And ultimately, that's what has been most adaptive to us. The tribes
Mm-hmm.
that had this type of built-in in-group bias were the ones that thrived. The ones that didn't, the ones that were more willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, were less likely to survive. That's why more people today have in-group bias than we give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. All these biases that we have them because they are adaptive to a certain degree. They have helped us survive over the past millennia. But like with anything, if you take it to an extreme, it then turns against you.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So on that note, are you ready to go ahead and move on to the next question?
I'd want to say one thing more about politics, and that's, Jonathan Haidt in his book, he has this metaphor for a country being like a bird, and it has both the left wing and a right wing, and both wings need to be functioning properly for the bird to take off.
I
If
love
we
it.
could think about yeah, if
I love it. That's good. That's good.
yeah, and if we could think of politics that way, of, seeing the other side not as the enemy, but as a party with complementary views that sort of help balance our own thinking and our own proclivities towards, I don't know, like they help balance us out when we go too extreme. If we can think of them as a sort of counterforce to us, and that they're also in their way doing what they think is best for the country, then I think we can find both acceptance and action.
That's a very good point. In many ways, I mean, like the United States in particular, without a right and a left, we probably would have gone the way of the dinosaur a long time ago. I mean, could you imagine if there was no right and there was only left? I mean, this place would be freaking chaos, dude. It would be chaos.
Yeah.
And could you imagine if there was no left and there was only right? We probably would have annihilated ourselves and the rest of the world in some kind of nuclear holocaust a long time ago, too.
Yeah. Yeah. So both parties help to counterbalance each other and each other's worst tendencies.
There's a really, I mean, oh man, I think I've told you about this book before in our chats, but Leonard Slane, he's got this really good book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess, and in it, he pretty much says, that the culture war that we're experiencing, really what it comes down to, it's a battle between the left hemisphere of the brain and the right hemisphere of the brain. I mean, he says that there are people that tend to be more left hemispheric dominant, and there's people that tend to be more right hemispheric dominant, and a lot of it depends on the type of media that we're absorbing. I mean, he says visual media tends to produce a more right-brained society. Textual societies, textual civilizations, it's like take a religious society, for example, ancient Judaism, they believed in the book, they believed in the word, the spoken word. Societies that tend to believe in the spoken word or the written word tend to be more left brain dominant, and the left brain versus right brain have all these different characteristics that come to light when one side is predominantly active versus the other one, so you have, your woke side of the country, that you can say is typically more right-brained. And then you've got your conservative side, which tends to be, the law and order side, that's more predominantly left brain, and the reason why we're experiencing this whole cultural shift to begin with is because social media. You look at social media, it's all visual stimulus, and, that's causing a hyper dominance of right brain processes, that make us more inclined to attribute feminine modalities into our psychology.
Yeah, there's a theory that I like. It's in politics. It's called horseshoe theory. So it's like, a horseshoe, it's shaped like that. And the two sides, the left and the right, are kind of close to each other. And so horseshoe theory states that the more extreme any side gets, the closer they become each other. Like the far left and the far right have actually got quite a bit in common with each other, more than they would realize. I think you said to me once in a chat about like growing intolerance. And yeah, I think there is some truth to that when you sort of focus so much on what you hate, you end up becoming it in certain ways. You end up turning into your opposite.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. I mean, it's the old Nietzsche quote, oh man, how does it go? Take care when fighting monsters, lest you become one.
Yes.
Or something
Come
like
on.
that,
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
it's definitely true. You see, I mean, I've commented that on a couple of freaking reels that I've seen on Instagram of people that are just, beside themselves with rage, about the other side, and it's like, you gotta caution against the way you behave, lest you become the monster that you're trying to oppose,
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
So let's see here. Going on to our next question. So within today's fast-paced culture of consumption, should we ever stop striving for more, bigger, faster, better lifestyles? How can we determine whether or not more action or inhibition is required within our respective lifestyle? You know, so I mean, should we? Is there a point where we should stop being the David Gogans who's striving for for more? Maybe he's not an appropriate example, but you know what I mean.
Maybe.
There's the whole
Yeah.
the whole hustle culture that exists, particularly
Yes,
on
very much so.
Instagram. I mean, is there a point where that's just detrimental to our happiness?
Yes, there is. So I would distinguish between healthy desires and unhealthy desires. And the difference between the two is why you're having them, what's causing them. So, like, take a healthy desire and say you're thirsty, right? So you just have a glass of water or maybe two glasses of water and you stop being thirsty. So a healthy desire sort of kind of extinguishes itself once that need is met, right? And then there's an unhealthy desire, say a need for alcohol. And if you're an alcoholic, there's no amount of alcohol that will ever really truly satisfy that craving and really take it away. It doesn't ever extinguish. So
Very true.
yeah, so it's you can never really get enough of an unhealthy desire. You can never really get enough of something that you don't really need. And so, what determines whether a desire is healthy or unhealthy? And it comes down to, well, what's driving it. If it's a healthy desire, it's usually coming from a place of curiosity or just wanting to experience new things or wanting growth. Just, it's coming from a good place. If it's an unhealthy desire, you want more because you're trying to prove something to yourself. It's coming from a fear-based place. It's coming from a place of pain. So, when you look at what's driving you, is it coming from a good place, from a place of happiness, or is it coming from some kind of inner void in yourself? And if it's coming from some kind of inner void in yourself, that's when you need to stop and look deeper.
Very well said. Very well said. For me, it's reflective of another book that I had heard a while ago, a life-changing book. I'd recommend it to anyone. It's called Stillness is the Key, and it's by Ryan Holiday. Now, it was a really good book. In there, he's got a chapter where he talks about, professional athletes, rising and accomplishing more in life and what's driven them. And one of the examples that he talks about in his book is Michael Jordan. Who's a more successful athlete than Michael Jordan? I mean, it's hard pressed to find, maybe an argument for the greatest athlete that's ever lived,
Yeah.
Uh, But he points out that in Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame speech, when he was finally going to get inducted into the Hall of Fame, he's at the end of his career. It's time to reap the benefits. It's time to relax and have that drink and reap the benefits of a life of accomplishments. So he goes up to the podium and proceeds to go on and on about how, he was dropped from his high school team, and if that coach can see him now. And then he goes on and on about all of these people that doubted him, and he speaks very, very negatively. He calls people out in the crowd, and it's a famous speech that he did. I mean, you can YouTube it and see it, And I mean, what Ryan Holiday pointed out is after all of his success, all of his striving, and all of the success that he had, greatest basketball player of all time, hardly anyone disputes that. He was still very much up there on the podium when he accepted his Hall of Fame induction, a very bitter guy. He was still a very bitter guy that harbored all of these inner bitter emotions that had propelled him to the top of his field. I mean, it was adaptive to him. It made him the
Yeah.
greatest basketball player of all time. but he still very much held all of this resentment and all of this bitterness inside, and just was not a happy guy at the end of it, despite all of his success, Another one that he talks about was Tiger Woods, and how Tiger Woods, a horrible life that guy lived. I mean, God, if you're not familiar with the story of Tiger Woods, I pick up anything about him. Even Stillness is the Key. They've got really interesting chapter about him, and the way the guy's life ended up, with that car crash and everything, and kind of, being, now I guess he's kind of at the top of his game and all, but for a while, with the affairs that he had and whatnot, he lived in disgrace for quite some time, and there was a deep self-loathing about him that still existed despite all his success. And, they point out
Yeah.
in the book the reason why was because, his father was very abusive to him. He was very abusive to him. They would have him in the high chair for hours watching his father golf. No food, no water, no nothing, just watching his father golf, totally neglected, it was a Michael Jackson effect. Michael Jackson's another one that you can use an example of, they were compelled or propelled to, the upper echelons of success, but we're still very miserable in life, because they didn't have this practice of acceptance and of being able to find satisfaction in their life and where they were and what they had accomplished.
Yeah.
And, it was ingrained to them as kids, but it's just unfortunate how you see, they're prime examples of how, success is one thing. If you want success, action will get you success. But if you want to be happy in life, if you want to, at some point, you got to be content with the fruits of your labor. And for that, you need to practice acceptance. And that's kind of what a lot of these high performing athletes, such as Michael Jackson, for example, didn't really have is this acceptance of who they were. You know what I mean?
Very well said.
Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know quite a few people like this. Well, okay, I don't know people who are as elite as that personally, but I know quite a few people who are very successful in their careers. They're sort of this very much into this hustle and grind mentality. One of them sort of grew up in poverty, and he's sort of spent his life trying to achieve it and trying to make the most of himself. And he's accomplished quite a bit and has a lot to be proud of. And yet he's not happy. You can tell that he's being driven by the demons of his past. So he grew up in poverty, and I think inside you can see that he's still that poor kid who is afraid of being poor, and that is what is driving him till now. So he has not had a moment's peace.
Oh man,
even
you know
after
what?
becoming rich. Yeah.
And just before the show, we were talking about it off air. My own experience, of going through massive weight loss. I experienced that same exact thing. I couldn't accept with what I seen in the mirror. I couldn't accept it. I had loose skin that was just soul crushing, and today is still a struggle. It's still a struggle to live with that. But for me, it was the lack of acceptance that got me in this torturous cycle, of just binging out on the weekends and over exercising during the week and torturing myself out of my own self-loathing. It took me, many philosophy books to come to the conclusion that, well, hey, you know what? It beats diabetes. It beats many of the things that I could have suffered from, because of the weight that I had gained, So, you could be successful in life, but unless you adopt a practice of acceptance to go along with that, you'll never find peace,
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's about taking stock of the blessings that you have, and, acknowledging what you have in life, and not always feeling like you've got to do more. I mean, it is okay to once in a while, to sit back and kind of reap the benefits of what you sowed.
Yes, very much so. I agree.
So next question. Let's see, where was I? It was George Orwell. So George Orwell had famously said, happiness can exist only in acceptance. Can happiness be found within a practice of action as well? How can we adopt a practice of action while allowing ourselves to experience happiness and contentment?
So I personally think that you need both action and acceptance to be happy. They need to work together, and either one on its own is incomplete. So, okay, let me give you an example. Okay, say you have someone in your life that causes you a lot of grief. It could be a parent or a friend or a boss or a colleague. Okay, so the first thing you would need to figure out is what is in your control to change and what is not in your control to change. What you can control is how you act towards them. What you cannot control is how they act towards you, although you can influence it to a slight degree, but you can't control it, right? And so acceptance in that case sort of means surrendering to the moment as it is, accepting that the situation is happening right now and you're having a reaction to it. Like maybe this person has insulted you or has treated you disrespectfully, and you're feeling, say, anger or sadness at the moment, right? And so in that moment, you would need acceptance, and you would say, you would need acceptance, and then after that would come the action.
Well, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but that's about all we've got time for today. If you want the rest of the interview, you're going to have to wait for the part 2 to come out, and there will be a sequel to this. We've got a lot more to cover here in terms of practicing acceptance and versus taking action in the modern world. So, we tried to gear all these questions towards, what's going on in society today to kind of make them relevant. That way, you get an idea of how these two philosophical concepts apply to you these days, even if you're not a practicing philosopher. If you're just living your day-to-day life and trying to figure out how to make it through life, this podcast can definitely help you how to do so. So, let's see, Diane, it was a pleasure. I thank you so much for joining me here today, and thank you so much for willing to do the part 2 and to continue this journey that we went ahead and started on this podcast. So, as you can see, I'm getting invaded here, man, by little ones left and right. So, why don't you go ahead and tell us where we can find you, where you want people to look for you, what you've got coming along down the pipe, and what we could expect in the future from Diane Zachariah and the Unknow-It-All page.
You can find me on Instagram. My handle is at unknowitall.dz, and I post weekly. If you like mini essays on psychology and philosophy and how we can improve ourselves and our lives, then yeah, feel free to follow me. I've also got a webinar coming up in 2 weeks about how to find calmness and confidence. So yeah, stay tuned for that and for more information about that.
That's awesome, man. I definitely look forward to all of that. I'm looking forward to anything that comes on your page. I definitely follow, and anytime anything pops up, it's the first thing that pops up on my feed, man. And I always make sure that I go ahead and read the caption, dude, and whatever you have to say. Because you definitely got some strong psychological insights, that definitely make me think about myself and those around me in a different way. And that's one of the big things that I appreciate about you and your account. Mm-hmm. And having you here on this show. And so I'd also like to remind everyone to subscribe to the podcast wherever you may be listening. You could find me at the Mad Philosophers Society on Instagram. The podcast is now renamed the Mad Philosopher Society. I need to work on revamping the YouTube channel, so I'm going to do that for this episode to make sure that we get it out on there too as well. Check me out on Substack. I've been writing bi-weekly articles on there that will also make you think differently about yourself and about the world around you. So, I appreciate you guys here joining us here. And Diane, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Jesse. It's been a real pleasure for me too.
Take care.